I've been in a lot of group therapy groups, and I've noticed people come in with different things that they're struggling with and different strengths and weaknesses. And one area that shows up a lot is attachment styles. When you get people in a room that have not spent a lot of time together, they start to form relationship bonds and they start to feed off of each other for good or for worse. So I find it's helpful to understand your attachment styles and what they might be doing in a group setting and what they might be doing in your personal life. Because group therapy is just a micro example of what your life is outside of the therapy room. The first thing to understand is there are four main attachment styles. There's secure, which is comfortable with emotional closeness and independence. Anxious, fearful of abandonment, constantly seeking reassurance. Avoidant, struggles with intimacy, values independence and emotional distance. Disorganized, a mix of anxious and avoidant behaviors, often rooted in trauma or chaotic early experiences in life. These styles usually are formed through our relationships as children with our parents, our caregivers, the people closest to us. Our first relationships with our mom and dad, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters. Those are the foundations that usually build up our attachment styles, and how those relationships interact with us have a large part in how we develop our attachment styles as we become adolescents and adults. That can vary as we get older and as we shift from parents to maybe mentors and coaches, teachers, peers, other elements that play into that, but the foundation is still the same. So how does this attachment style affect us when we add in addiction or mental health? Typically what we see is there's a shift. When someone is not feeling secure, they might shift towards some unhealthy relationship patterns. There's two that are really big that I see a lot in the group rooms. One is we call trauma bonding. And that is where people are sharing something that's difficult for them, or something that's bad that's happened to them, or a trauma that's happened to them. And someone else is like, I feel it too. I feel that with you. And they form a connection. They form something of a shared experience, and they form almost like we can do this together, which isn't necessarily the worst thing ever. However, that can morph and turn into romantic relationships or codependent relationships, or relationships in which one person feels like now they can help save that other person, and then they take the focus off of themselves and put the focus on someone else. And when you put the focus on someone else and you're not really in a good place yourself, it's difficult to get better and get to a healthy space in your own life. So that focus on other people's needs, their self-esteem is more important than yours. It can, whatever that is that you're focusing on that's outside of you, like their everything, creates a disorganized attachment and creates an anxious attachment, and it usually ends badly. A couple other attachment styles that show up with the trauma bonding and the codependency are anxious attachment. This may also be a contributor to substance use in the first place, or enhanced anxiety and depression. Another one would be avoidant attachment, where this substances may numb emotions and help people avoid dealing with their intimacy or their stress. And I say help loosely because it's a temporary fix to a problem and just gets worse when it's not addressed. So as we look at this, let's look a little deeper at how this affects someone in their recovery from mental health or addiction. They get to this point where they're seeking to heal other people more than themselves, and they form these toxic relationships. What may have started out as seemingly a good thing, like we're friends, we're bonding, we're getting more days of recovery, or getting more days together where we're not falling into old patterns. And it might be mixed and confused with love. The emotional intensity of a trauma bond feels like love, and it feels so good. And you see it in the media and the movies we watch frequently, like the big action movies. Like, I don't know, if you go back to the 1990s, there was one called Speed. Keanu Reeves, in his heyday, has to save the damsel in distress. He's on this bus that if it goes too slow, it's going to explode. Whatever. They're like hugging and kissing by the end. They're in a relationship. They formed a trauma bond. Well, you don't know what happens after that. They don't even know each other in reality, and then eventually the real story comes out. We're not even compatible. We're so different. We have different views, different values, and then it ends up in something, of a disaster. So, or we have the emotional codependency and how the anxious attachments patterns build, or I'm only good if you're good. And it really hinders someone's personal recovery. So if the person is trying to get better, and this is an example I saw recently where two people in recovery met in group therapy, they moved in together, they became really close, and they were doing really well for a while. And what I mean by a while, like longer than most, like over a couple of years. And then one partner started to blame the other partner. My life would be better if you didn't do this or you didn't do that. And that partner started acting as a victim, and it was a precursor to a relapse. So this partner, he didn't want to own or accept where he was at emotionally and mentally. He'd gotten used to his partner filling in the gaps for him and helping him feel better. But with codependency, that's like fuel for a fire that eventually runs out, and it can turn to seeking for validation, fishing for compliments, or blaming to get more attention and support and love. So this focus of saving the other partner actually became dangerous. So this person, when they relapsed, immediately got sicker and sicker, and then the other person decided, I have to hold a boundary, stepped out of the relationship, moved out, went back to support systems that were more healthy, and started seeking support and health, and didn't want to compromise her recovery or her emotional well-being by staying in that relationship. Now, it's very, very, very rare that those relationships work out long term. Now, we look at regular relationships that don't start with the trauma bond. Maybe they start with common ground and other things. They already have an uphill battle if they're not treated with a ton of tenderness, love, and respect and care. But then you add in codependency, trauma bonding, people who aren't quite healthy or well enough on their own, and then they try to save and solve each other's problems. It's not a good formula. So if you find yourself getting pulled into that, recognize that anything you put ahead of your recovery or ahead of your mental well-being, you will lose. You'll essentially lose. It may not be today or tomorrow, but it will be in the near future. Very rarely does that go beyond a year. So it's usually a week or a month, and it all explodes. Someone relapses, or both people relapse, or someone's mental health just gets really poor and the other person's does too. Not a good pattern. So understanding your attachment styles is really key. Having a self-awareness will help you master and recognize your emotional triggers, where unhealthy relationship patterns are forming, where codependent behaviors are coming in, and now you can start to see them a little more clearly and break the cycles before they root or before they settle in. So if you know your anxious attachment, you can actively work on self-soothing instead of relying on others for constant validation. That could look like meditation, self-care, doing cold work, doing things that are working for you, and helping yourself realize that you're gonna be okay, and giving yourself time to learn that and heal. If you look at like a young child where this attachment can form, they may have had a parent that was overly attentive or not attentive at all, and it had a kind of a side effect go one way or the other, where the child may have, this is an example my doctor gave me when we had our first son. He fell down in the doctor's office, and immediately my wife and I, oh, you okay, honey, you okay? And the doctor's like, hey, hold on, just so you know, you can wait and see if he really is okay, if he really does need attention. And lo and behold, he got up, cried a little bit, rubbed his knee, and then walked it off. So that showed us, like, we don't need to overly soothe our child. We can allow him to heal. And, maybe sometimes it goes where we don't notice those things, and that child may need a little more. But if you're paying attention, spending quality time, that's going to kind of come up. So if that's you, and you're now an adult or you're an adolescent, and you never really learned how to self-soothe because either of those examples, too much or too little, you can reparent yourself. You can kind of go back in time, practice skills, and teach yourself that you're okay and move to more of a secure attachment. So understanding your attachment style can enable you to make the right coping strategies, to take approaches that work for you. The anxious attachment can be a focus on developing emotional independence. Oftentimes that's a struggle where you haven't had your own emotional independence, and we might see that show up as, I don't even know what my emotions are. Early on in a group therapy setting or an individual therapy setting, we may ask someone to identify their feelings, identify their emotion, and we'll have them explore what we call the feelings wheel, where they see there's like actually more than 4 feelings. There's dozens of feelings, and really try to understand what are the underlying feelings I'm having besides the basics. So understanding and developing your emotional awareness can help you create some independence, and it'll help you alleviate some of the stress and pain of not really knowing what's going on inside you. So when you can name it, you can identify it, you can work on it, and you can allow it to be felt. Now on the avoidant attachment side of things, you can work on your vulnerability and emotional connections. So that avoidant attachment persona may not like to ever be seen as weak or vulnerable. And you may have a difficult time in relationships when they start to get serious. If they start to get serious, you might be running or self-sabotaging. Break it off. I'll hurt you before you can hurt me. I'll ruin this before you can ruin it. Stay in a position of power. Those relationships may look uneven, where that person stays in a position of power, but they never really get close. If you're never really close, eventually those relationships burn out and you lose those relationships, whether they be romantic or they be parent-child, or they may be friends. If you're not ever letting anyone in, you never trust anyone, you're not going to go very deep in those relationships. So what do you do to build from here? Like, how do you break your trauma bonds, your codependency? How do you support yourself in healing? First of all, step was to understand what you might be looking at. If you're more aware and self-aware of what you're going through, you're more able to see the patterns, break the patterns. So for building these things and preventing trauma bonding or preventing relationship distress that's unneeded, you got to start looking at deeper. So trauma bonding, learn to set healthy boundaries and recognize when emotional intensity is unhealthy. So kind of pull yourself out of that. Look above, like you're looking down on yourself, and see the version of you that's in the middle of the mess, and look, hey, is this healthy or unhealthy? And I like to say words like, is this serving me or not serving me? It takes some of the emotion out of it and allows it to be more analyzed. Is this working for Jared or not working for Jared? Now, going on to codependency, you learn how to prioritize your emotional health without feeling responsible for others' well-being. So now you start looking at, am I taking care of me? And we hear all the time with codependency, well, that makes me feel selfish. Well, it's not selfish to be healthy. We know the analogies, if you haven't heard them already, like the airplane mask dropping down. If you don't put that on yourself first, how are you going to help the child next to you? If you go put the child on first, you'll pass out and you both die. That's an example of codependency. I like to think of it as being self-full. When you're full of good emotional health, you're more capable of helping other people appropriately. And you learn, like, am I helping someone that can help themselves, or am I teaching someone to help themselves? Promoting independence and promoting a secure attachment. So whether that be your children, your friends, your partner, you want to be in an interdependent relationship where you're both able to add to the relationship and not take it apart. Looking at your networks of support are really important in forming these attachments. We find that when people have more healthy relationships, the more healthy they are themselves. I know I've experienced that in my own life where I've lost some connections to friends, or lost a job, or lost some interest in some hobbies that bonded me with other people, and pretty soon I just didn't feel as stable. I felt a little more out of it. And when someone goes through addiction, they almost lose every single healthy relationship. It's almost inevitable If they have their addictions going long enough, or if they have really poor mental health, they're going to lose all their healthy relationships or come close to losing all of them. So the opposite of that is forming healthy connections, healthy bonds, hanging out with good people and promoting a stable environment for you to succeed. So the more success you have in that environment, the more likely you are to sustain your growth. Now, statistically, in the book Change Anything, they talk about when someone's able to identify 7 areas of their life and make those areas healthy, good friends, good family, good job, good religion, good spirituality, good community, whatever those are, you start identifying and systematically build them. After they've completed around 7 of those and secured them in a secure position, the likelihood of them staying healthy goes up 1,000%. That's a massive change, and it's massively encouraging for those who are seeking long-term health and long-term recovery. So staying that and sustaining your long-term recovery, it's got to be something you put as a high priority. It has to be above the short-term stuff. Where we talked about a little earlier, everything you put ahead of your recovery, you're going to lose. So everything you put above your mental health, you're going to lose. And essentially that's meaning that there's a hierarchy of needs, and we see this. If I put my highest good as the relationship I'm in, as soon as something goes bad, everything unravels. If I put my highest good, my higher power, God, everything underneath that is going to be fine. And sometimes that looks as simple as I've got to be selfless in situations of serving others and taking care of my family. And then in other cases, it might be I need to be self-full, where I'm identifying a codependent relationship or a boundary that's being pressed. So you have to start to become more clear and see where your boundaries are, what looks like codependency, what looks like trauma bonds, what looks healthy, and support the healthy things and stop supporting the unhealthy things. And developing your healthy coping skills. For me, that looks like exercise frequently, it's breathing, it's practicing breath work through my nose, it's taking my baths and relaxing with Epsom salts, it's communicating when I'm struggling, it's sharing my life with the people I love and spending quality time with them with my phone down. There's a lot of those things that go into my formula of success for my own self and my family. When I stop doing those little by little, things get more unraveled and start to fall apart. So what are your attachment styles? How are they interplaying with your life? Are you able to start looking at them from above and pulling yourself in a direction that you can see, if I change this little thing here and move towards secure, I can heal. And we look at that in therapy, we look at that in coaching. We see how when someone works on their past, they start to kind of clear out the closet and work through the traumas. They have more capacity to live in the present. And when they turn those past experiences into knowledge, they can have a more clear future. But too many of us go right back to old behaviors or old environments or old relationships that are unhealthy because we don't see our own patterns. So you have to see your patterns. You have to start moving in a way that you can be aware of what's healthy and not healthy. And ask yourself, how many times can I keep going in this unhealthy pattern? And usually when I ask a client who's in early recovery, they'll say, I don't know if I have another recovery in me. If I relapse, I might die. Or if I go into another bad relationship, I don't know how I'm going to come out of that. There's an awareness in early recovery that someone sees, like they can see it kind of clearly. I really know what's not good for me. They just may not know how to live in a way that is good for them. Well, this is a foundational piece. Understanding your attachment styles. Zooming out and slowing it down and trusting the healthier parts of your system as you build them. And if all you have in early recovery is a good counselor or a good coach, that's a good place to start. But you want to expand. Healthy recovery meetings, healthy support groups, reconnecting with healthy members of your family that maybe they disconnected from you while you were unhealthy for them. And maybe in your mind, you're like, oh, they were not nice to me, but actually they might have been the only people who actually showed true compassion and love for you because they held a boundary. So reconnecting with the healthy people, reconnecting with healthy friends, doing it slowly, step by step, giving yourself space to move into a healthy version of you that improves little by little, 1% a day, brick by brick, to make it stick. And we say that a lot because it's so important. It's so important to remember this is a process that should take time, and it's effective. It's a formula for success when you work it. Just like they say in the circles of those meetings, it works if you work it. It's not a rush job. It's not a hustle. It's a marathon. You practice each of these pieces and become aware. And if all you learned today was, man, I trauma bond, I want to stop doing that. Great. Or, man, I do a lot of codependency, I want to stop doing that. Or, I just want to figure out what's healthy. I want to make one improvement in one area so I have one of those 7 strengthening relationship pieces so I can increase my success chances up another 10% or 50% or 100% or 1,000% when you're really kicking butt. That's my goal for you. I hope that this is informative. I hope you take it serious and it helps you build your path to successful long-term mental health gains and recovery. Have a great day, and if you found this helpful, please share it with someone in need and support our processes by liking and subscribing or whatever all those things you do in the social media universe that you live in that help things spread. Have a great day.